Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast, where we incorporate a panoramic view of flute-related topics. I am your host, Heidi K. Begay, and this is episode 33, an interview with Nicole Chamberlain. Today's episode is sponsored by J&K Productions. They produce all of my episodes, from adding the intro and outro music to editing the audio and all post-production needs. Contact them for your next podcast project at jkproductions.media. Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Good. How are you doing, Heidi?
Excellent. Thank you for asking. So you are currently residing in Georgia.
Yeah, Atlanta more specifically.
Okay, great. So for those of you who may not know you, they would have to be living under a rock. But could you talk about your background, who you are, what you're currently working on?
Yeah, so I am a composer, but I'm also a flutist. So I write a lot of flute music for obvious reasons. But right now I'm actually in the middle of finishing a commission for a middle school band piece.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and that will be premiered at the Georgia Music Educators Conference in January.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're getting down to the end of the line where I need to finish these edits just basically from the request of the band director. So sometimes that happens where you need to address some playing abilities and time constraints. And so that's what we're doing right now.
Oh, neat. Is this your first composition for a band?
It's my eighth.
It's your eighth.
Actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm known a lot more for my flute music because I have such a big catalog, but I've actually written for symphonies and band, obviously, and choir, and even an opera for children.
Oh my goodness, I feel so silly. I knew your flute works and the chamber works with flute included. I did not know about your larger ensembles. That's so exciting.
Right, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but it's easier to get stuff played with smaller chamber ensembles. The larger ensembles are very challenging. They have a very limited programming that they can put on, usually a limited amount of shows they can even have. And then they'll limit even how many new works they'll put on. And then they'll limit it to the people that are more known. So it's very challenging for a composer to get works performed by a larger ensemble.
Oh, okay. Well, that would make sense. There's just more people involved and interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool. So how did you choose the flute in the beginning? Because I know you went to college for flute, and then you have also a degree in composition.
No, actually, I did not go for flute at all.
Okay. Man, I need to backtrack and redo all my work here.
No, that's okay. I mean, how could you know? You have to do at least 2 years of flute if you're going to be a music composition major. That's what I was implying, because I knew your bachelor's was in composition. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So why did I choose the flute? I actually chose the clarinet.
Oh, yeah.
My oldest sister, she's about 10 years older than me, my oldest sister. And so she played clarinet.
Okay.
And so that was what was available to me at the time. And she actually gave me my first lessons. She taught me how to read sheet music. And I just got impatient with reeds that kept breaking. And I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, which is 4 hours south of here and on the coast. And so there was one music store and it was 45 minutes away.
Okay.
And there was no internet shopping. So if I needed a reed, I was at the mercy of my parents who if they had time or the funds available to go get me reeds.
Wow.
But luckily there was a flutist at the church who subbed with the Savannah Symphony at the time. And she went with my mom and me and to all the pawn shops and got me started on a flute that worked.
Okay.
And so I started from there. I just was curious about the flute. Number one, I didn't need reeds. And then number two, I just didn't understand how you could make a sound on it. You couldn't put the instrument in your mouth. You didn't put your lips against anything. And I just didn't understand and I wanted to know. And so that's why I picked the flute, basically.
Well, you were very beyond your years then, because, you don't really, at least for me, maybe I'm a slow learner, but that was not one of my first thoughts looking at the instrument, thinking, oh, I don't put the head joint in my mouth. How do I get a sound out of it?
Right. I mean, it's just, well, I mean, I don't know about that part, but I mean, I was curious. It didn't make sense to me, from the pictures that I saw.
Okay.
And then watching the Flutist at our church play, I still couldn't grasp or understand what was going on. I just wanted to know.
Yeah.
And I learned by doing, and so that's what I did.
That's great. So when you compose, do you compose on a keyboard, or do you, I know, hopefully before I put my foot in my mouth again, I think you use Finale. Is that correct?
I do, yes.
Okay.
I don't know how you found that out, but that's amazing.
Okay. I think I read a transcript from another interview or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe me complaining about it every once in a while on the internet.
Yeah. Okay. Yay. 3 times the charm. So you use Finale. Do you use a keyboard, or I'm sure you play the flute or the clarinet when you're writing pieces for those instruments?
I don't play clarinet anymore.
Okay.
So I don't own one. Like, I was 10 and I ditched it. I never looked back. But I sing a lot when I get a lot of tunes down.
Okay.
If I'm writing for flute, obviously I'll play on my flute. It just makes sense to do it.
Right.
Unless I'm trying to make it really hard for someone else that's a better player, and then I might not as much. But I do have a keyboard, and I do use it for pitch reference or to work harmonies out. But I'm a terrible pianist, and it's not for public consumption. So I sing and I write and I think it through, and maybe I'll play on my flute. That's basically how I get started.
Okay, that's great. So I guess I should have asked you first, what inspired you to start composing?
I mean, when I was younger, I always kind of made up silly songs and goofed around on, my instrument, improvised a little bit. I did not know that concert composers were still a thing.
Okay.
So I assumed that movie composing would be the way to go if I was going to compose. And at that time, when I was in high school, I was actually studying 2D animation.
Okay.
And I had ideas that I would animate my own cartoons and compose the soundtracks. I went to college and I even it was more of a double degree because they were separate schools. So I got a bachelor's in digital media where I did 3D animation and a music composition degree.
Oh, fun.
Which just about killed me. But because I went 5 years straight with no breaks during the summer and overloading every semester.
Wow.
And so when I got out, I was able to get a job in a small multimedia company where they did children's cartoons, basically. And I did some animation, and I did basically the music composition as a musician for hire. So that's how I started to do it. And then I realized that it was more freeing to be a concert composer. I wasn't restricted to someone else's ideas who just, for whatever reason, didn't like the oboe, and I'd not be able to write for the oboe.
Oh, no.
Or something like that. It'd be some silly hang up.
Huh.
And I did a little bit of independent movie writing as well, and it was the same thing. Like, the director had very definitive ideas and would even put in a temporary track and ask me to write something like that track.
Okay. Wow.
Which would never work because it was never going to be that track.
Right.
So I started, while I was at that job, I was able to write for some concerts or chamber ensemble, and they would just accept whatever I gave them. And it was a lot more gratifying and freer. Pay wasn't as good, but it was less frustrating. And so that's what I did. And that's how I got to do what I am doing now. Wow.
So writing and composing for the animation, it sounded very limiting, but that's amazing that you had that opportunity and that experience just to know that that's what you didn't want to do. And you wanted to be freed. And I bet in a way, like when you had that liberating moment to write for the stage, you just thought, oh, wow, like that just feels nice.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's a little bit of a control freak, I guess, in me. It was great to not have everything questioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, very neat. So I'm sure that every piece that you write is its own unique individual work. But in general, do you have a process for writing? Like you mentioned, you sing. I mean, do you hear it? Do you have like, I don't know, do you hear a little sound, not to be too cliche, but do you hear like raindrops, or do you hear the screen on a screen door, like, you know, that metal scraping, or I don't know, maybe I'm being a little too cliche. I'm just curious about like trying to dive into your head as a composer, like what the process is and what gets you inspired to write a new piece.
Well, sometimes, so if I'm writing just to write, which is few these days, I get more commissions and there's usually requests, which I do like. Now I just talked about how I hated having all these constrictions.
Right. But
on the other hand, it's nice to have some requests what the ensemble's looking for.
Okay.
And so knowing what the instrumentation's going to be, maybe what the energy they're looking for, like if it's a really fun, fast-paced piece, or if they're looking for a slow, melancholy piece to contrast the rest of the program, that is helpful. Or they have a theme in mind, and that is also helpful to kind of get me started. And if I know those things, I might do a little research to get some inspiration. Huh. But sometimes there's no guidance, and what I generally will just start with is just start improvising. Whether it's I just start thinking in my head, or if I just play on my flute or sing, and I'll try a few things out, and I'll pick from the litter of melodies that I've written and see which one I want to develop more.
Okay.
And so for me, that's how we'll start, with some fragments, and then I'll expand on it and play off of those, and sometimes puzzle piece them together if they seem to be of the same track or thought.
Yeah. So to me, it sounds like if you are being commissioned for a specific work for an ensemble, just having that small direction down that path of what the ensemble wants, I'm sure. I mean, for me, because I'm a control freak, but it doesn't sound like I'm as creative as you by any means, just because, like, when you're talking about improvising and writing these melodies and stuff, like, for me, having, like, a commission in the ensemble saying, I want this, this, and this, for me, it'd be like a checklist. It would almost feel like, okay, I have something to grasp onto, but the whole, like, oh, we don't have any requirements and you get to do what you want to do. To me, that would be so, I don't even know, like, where to start because there are so many options.
Right. And I think that's sometimes what I get stuck on too.
Okay.
I mean, it's a lot of, if there's too many options, I won't settle on anything.
Huh.
Or I will. But sometimes the commissioners get me out of my comfort zone.
Oh, interesting.
For example, I had a friend who wanted to do tuba and electronics.
Okay.
And I've written for electronics 20 years ago in college.
Yeah.
But and it was just for electronics, but he wanted to play tuba with fixed media. And then we found some NASA public domain sounds to use in electronics work. And so that was a very uncomfortable place for me to be, because I was writing for an instrument that I don't get to write for, but I love. And then I'd had to work in this other side and use my other side of the brain, this digital media side, where I had to be a little more logical in my selection of things to do, but still be creative. And that was very tough. So sometimes commissioners give me a challenge, and I think it ends up to be a very gratifying process, even though it may be a little frustrating along the way. But at the end, it's pretty fun when a commissioner has ideas you would have never thought of doing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you get some gratification of just having a blank manuscript paper and then in a month or a couple of weeks or however long it took you to write that piece, just seeing it completed and then hearing it on stage? Like, it started from nothing. I mean, it was just a blank piece of manuscript paper and then hearing a full-out production of it.
My favorite part is hearing it being performed, like someone else doing it. I don't necessarily always enjoy playing it myself. That is the best part. That is the payoff for me, is hearing someone else perform it live. So yeah, I mean, I guess so. It's kind of like, it's very exhilarating. And I've even read, I think John Mackey, he's a band composer, probably a lot of people are familiar with. And he said he had a heart monitor on, like his fitness tracker with the heart monitor. he was watching one of his pieces being performed, and the heart tracker was just going off the charts.
Oh, cool.
Because it's just so exhilarating to hear. And I thought, well, I'm surely not the only one, or maybe I'm just crazy that you get this adrenaline rush from hearing someone else do it.
Right.
And very emotional. And it was kind of neat to see someone have physical evidence that, oh yeah, it's really happening. Like you're having a physical reaction to the hard work that you've put in.
Oh, wow. That's a really neat story. Thank you for sharing about the heart monitor. Just even hearing that John Mackey story, just to kind of make that connection, is really neat to hear.
Yeah.
My friend who's starting her PhD program in composition, I think at Yale or Harvard, it's one of the top Ivy League schools. But I watched her in Greece this last summer. She wrote a composition for the small ensemble, and she introduced the piece. She sat down, and I swear she was clenching my hand the whole time. And afterwards, I asked her, I said, Genevieve, what was going through your head? And she's like, oh, Heidi, that's my baby up there. I get so nervous. And I said, is it not exciting for you? She said, yes, it's exciting, but I'm also at the edge of my seat because I want everything to go well.
Right.
Yeah,
it's exciting and terrifying.
Mm.
And it just depends on who the players are, too. I mean, I've worked with Dr. Mary Matthews so many times that I know it's going to be an amazing performance every time. And she's so steady on the stage. So for me, it's fun when I go see her or someone else. It's when it's someone new, or if it's like an ensemble you're not used to writing for. Oh. And to hear it being performed, that's when it's terrifying. But when it's someone and that if it's not going to go well, it's not their fault. It's yours.
Oh, okay.
That's probably the terrifying part for me.
Yeah.
Because you hear, it's like when it's on stage, you hear all the mistakes or things you would have rewritten differently.
Okay.
It's like when you listen to yourself perform live.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, I could have phrased that better, or I could have not taken that breath there. Why did I do that? It's just a heightened sense of awareness.
Right.
When it's on stage. Yeah.
Huh. So speaking of babies and these pieces being on the stage, do you have a composition that is your all-time favorite? I know it's hard picking one of your children, but if you had to choose.
I mean, there's things I'm really proud of that I wish would get performed more.
Okay.
Like I have a flute sonata, 3/9 Lime. It's also on the album. I really like that piece a lot. I love it, but it doesn't get performed or programmed very often.
Oh, interesting.
I loved writing it. It wasn't a commission. Maybe that's part of it. I just wrote it because it was time to write a flute sonata, and I hadn't.
Okay.
And I'd had all these flute pieces, and I'd never written a sonata, and I was like, why have I not done this yet? So that is one of the pieces I wish was performed more.
Okay.
But I guess the piano part it's more of a duo than like a flute sonata, because the piano does have a huge role in it. It's not an accompanying part. And I don't know if that is the issue or not, or it's just long because it's a 12-minute flute sonata, and people rather perform, the standard flute sonatas.
Okay.
But that's the one I wish would be performed more. And also I have orchestral work called Ogeechee that I wish would get performed, because that one's close to my heart too. But it's an orchestra piece, and so it's only been performed by 2 orchestras. But
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that too. Just saying, well, this is a favorite of mine, and
I feel like the ones that are my favorites are the ones that people don't perform as often.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know what that says about me, and knowing what my audience prefer, I write.
Right. I'm trying to think of other writers and other arts, like literature. I bring her up because I finished one of her books, like Elizabeth Gilbert, who's very well known for Eat, Pray, Love. But I just finished her book, Big Magic. And you might like it, actually. She talks about the creative process of writing. And I found a lot of parallels to what we do as performers. And it sounds like a lot of parallels could be applied to you being a composer. And she said that, yes, I'm known for this book and that book, but these other books are dear to my heart too. And so I'm wondering if other arts out there have the same feelings about their work.
It'd be interesting. I feel like it does, especially musicians that perform a lot and they like to perform a certain piece, but no one else enjoys it as much,
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. So to kind of wrap up this episode, for the budding new composer, what advice would you give him or her pursuing the composer route?
Well, the hardest part about writing every day is writing every day, even though when you're writing crap, and you're writing crap. Sometimes you don't know you're writing crap, and then it's not until after you take a few days off and you look at it and you're like, well, that's no good. But sometimes, there's a lot to be learned from writing junk that's never going to be used. And so if you're writing junk, just keep writing and then go back and see, well, how could I fix it if it wasn't my piece?
Okay.
Being that objective about it. If I was teaching this person how to write, what would I recommend? Like, do I trash it? And rarely do I have to trash things. Sometimes I'm writing junk, but it's junk because it doesn't fit what I'm working on. It will fit somewhere else.
Okay.
And I might save it for later. And then the other thing, I guess I got a couple more pieces of advice. Write for yourself, because no one's going to play or perform your music like you will until you can convince your friends to write for them, because they will play your stuff all the time if they enjoy your music and they like you. And then that will help spread it out. And that's what kind of worked for me, is I wrote for myself, recorded myself, it hooked on some other people that were my friends, and then it introduced me to strangers. And so that's the process. And Joan Tower gave me that advice when I was in college. She came in to do a residency and she's like, why are you not writing for your other flute friends? Why are you writing for brass quintet? That makes no sense.
Oh, wow.
So when you're early and later, so I still write for my friends just to write for my friends. And then the last thing is the organize your website by instrument.
Okay.
I think every person that has performed new music is frustrated with going to a composer's website and seeing it listed in chronological order.
Okay.
And you can't find the music for your instrument.
I see.
I think that was helpful. The day I reorganized everything by instrument, I started selling more.
Oh, interesting. Well, yeah. I will say I do support that, because when I go to your website and I was looking for a piece for my last doctoral recital, there was no problem an issue. I just went flute and I went through and I found something that would work so I could play with one of my friends. And it was Wail flute for flute and trombone. And so it was easy to find. And I even like some of the pieces, not all of them, but some of the pieces have little audio clips.
Yeah.
And so that's really helpful too.
Yeah, that's the other piece. A composer can write drastically different from piece to piece, especially if they're still searching for their voice. And someone may not like a piece if they don't know what they're getting. And the audio, a good recording really helps to sell a piece. And that also made a difference. Even MIDI is almost, you might as well not even have audio, because it's hard to use your imagination with that. And a terrible live recording is still better than MIDI.
Okay.
So, and if the recording's terrible, just cut down to the part that was decent,
That makes sense.
So, yeah, I try to provide as much live audio as I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's really great advice. And the reason why that question kind of even evolved was because my last year at Lubbock for the third year of my DMA, I was teaching a student, and she has such a creative mind. And in lessons, she was just making all these references to like a story she read, or she would be like dancing out a part out of her flute music, or she would, in the middle of the lesson, like do a theatrical bit. And I thought, whoa, like this girl is like so colorful and vibrant. And I said to her, I said, have you ever thought about composing? Because you have all these really neat, unique ideas. And she said, oh yeah, I wanted to write my own pieces. I said, well, what's stopping you? And she said, oh, I don't know. I just don't know how to do it. I said, well, sing me a melody and let's, I'll dictate what you're doing and I can show you how to write. And I'm a composer by no means, but I do have enough music theory background to, help her in that area to get her started. And then she just took off. And I thought, oh, shoot, what do we do now? So I have this person who's really got into this, and I can only get her so far. And so I directed her to a TA in composition, and it worked out good in her favor. But yeah, that's why it got me curious, just to ask a professional composer how you would direct that young composer.
Oh, yeah, I think you did the right thing. I think a lot of people I think the word composer is so pretentious and so elevated that it's hard for a lot of people to consider that at all. Mm. And so I think that stops a lot of people. Mm. And like you said, you've had so much training in music. Mm-hmm. You know what you're doing.
Right.
Just get started and start writing. And if it's crap, it's crap. It'll be better the next time. Just like when you first picked up the flute, yep. You did not probably make a note the very first time.
No.
And you got lightheaded and things went wrong. But it's a whole process, and being patient with yourself, allowing yourself to make those mistakes is great, and I still feel weird when I call myself a composer because it feels a little much.
Yeah.
But yeah, just start.
Sure.
But yeah.
No, that's wonderful. And in the very final segment of this episode, I've been doing a new portion called Picks. And is there an item, or it could be music related or not, anything that you would recommend to the listeners?
There's a couple things that I just have done recently. I had this book for 20 years.
Yeah.
That I bought, and it's in 2 volumes. It's about Aaron Copland.
Oh.
And there's one volume between 1900 and 1942, the first part of his life, and then there's from 1942 till like the right before he died. And he wrote it. It's his autobiography, along with Viviana Perlis.
Okay.
And so when I was younger, I read the last part of his life, thinking that would be the part I need to know about, because that's when he was writing his really big things.
Right.
And so recently I was looking to read another book. I was like, I've never read this first volume. And I wish I had read it when I was in my 20s, because he didn't go to college. He didn't take the traditional journey to be a composer. And I don't think people realize that. He did not attend a university. And there was a lot of parallels I found in his life and obstacles that I found in mine about when to study, how far to study, who to study with, what to do with getting publishing, how to make money. It was just a very practical and insightful book, and it was written in a very accessible way. And his whole life was sprinkled with all these amazing people that were his friends, and it was a very enlightening book for anyone that wants to be a musician and not follow the traditional path to be a musician. And then I guess the other thing I would recommend is I just recently started teaching flute lessons on my own.
Yeah.
And so I was teaching at a store for a long time, and I decided to start doing it on my own. And so I use mymusicstaff.com.
Okay.
To help process payments and scheduling my students and all of that. And that's been a lifesaver and taken a lot of the awkwardness out of asking for money.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. So those are my 2 very different picks, I guess.
Okay. No, that's good.
All right.
Yeah, the website I'll have to check out, because literally this morning I had 5 students and one of them paid me. And the other 4, I hate, waiting to be handed a check or cash. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm asking these junior high girls, can you please pay me? And it just feels so ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can just I love it because you could just email the parents with the invoice, and it's like, you forgot to pay me this week.
Yeah.
Or you could do it on a monthly basis, which is what I do, and send them one big invoice. And then, because a lot of these kids too, they drive to your lesson, and they didn't see their parents that day to get a check.
Right.
So
they pay online.
They can pay online, or I also they can pay me by check or cash, and then I have a PayPal swipe that they can pay me with a card.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So my 2 picks this week are, for most of my listeners, they know I like to use essential oils. I had some health issues, years back, and instead of taking and I don't recommend this for everybody, you have to go see a doctor first. That's my disclaimer. But for me, I was just tired of being this roller coaster of them prescribing muscle relaxers and this and that. And I said, there has to be a better way, because for me, it just felt like a Band-Aid. And so I did research and I read, and of course, with guidance from a practitioner, I started getting into essential oils. And so I have a whole medicine cabinet full of them, but I had not used lemongrass or Clary sage ever before. And I went to Sprouts, our grocery store here, and just tested them out because I wanted some new aromas for my life. I got kind of tired of, lavender and tea tree oil for a while, so I wanted to spice things up. And Clary's...
It's kind of funny that you got tired of lavender.
No, well, yeah. Lavender's a great scent. Lavender's a great scent. I use it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Clary sage and lemongrass are my picks for this week because they have very clean scents. And and of course, there's a lot of great medicinal benefits to it, and I'm still learning about those. But yeah, the aromas are beautiful. So those are my 2 picks for today. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for sharing your time and your energy and your talents with us. And for myself, I know how valuable your time is, and I so appreciate you giving us some insight on your career path and just for the whole flute community and what you're contributing to it.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you having me on and chatting with you. It's always nice to know that people are seeing what I'm doing, and they enjoy it. It's nice.
Yeah, excellent. I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you, Nicole.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Today's episode is sponsored by J&K Productions. They produce all of my episodes, from adding the intro and outro music to editing the audio and all post-production needs. Contact them for your next podcast project at jkproductions.media. Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. For more information, please visit HeidiKBegay.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review in the iTunes store. Let's talk about flute.